Hi, lovelies. Today we're going to learn about intro paragraphs, and I'm sorry I'm not there to teach it to you, but this will be helpful because you might be able to put this online so you can use it to refer back to it for intro paragraphs continuously. Your intro paragraphs are extremely important. It's your reader's chance to get to know you right out of the gate. You've got to be really careful and stylistic with these. You want them to be interesting and dynamic, but you don't want to be cheesy and over the top with being dynamic. It's a really fine balance. You want to be professional because readers are already forming opinions about you right out of the gate. And when they're reading their intros, you want to really gather their trust immediately. So they should be about 6 to 8 sentences in length. When you get too much longer than that, it's just getting too wordy, too cumbersome for them to read. They really want to get to your argument and get to your point. So you want to be professional. You want to be sophisticated. You want to present some of the facts of your story. So for the type of piece that we're doing for this one, and for some of the pieces that we're going to be doing for 9th grade, some of the elements of your story that are important, not the entire plot line, but just enough so that readers can kind of grab on to what it is we need in order to understand what it is you're going to say in your arguments throughout the piece. Be professional, be sophisticated, present some of the facts, but do not be fluffy or wordy. Don't take forever to get to your point, but give us enough to go on. So it's that fine balance between the two. Avoid that conversational cliche language we've been talking about. The readers are not your buddies or your friends, so use that professional language. When you use professional language, you're being respectful to your reader, and you're showing them courtesy. Don't take too long to get to that point, and don't be too brief in the introduction, so we're lost and confused. So that 6 to 8 sentence length, make them nice, developed sentences, but don't make them run-ons. Okay, so we have tutors that can work with you. There are 3 main parts you want to work with. The hook is your most broad idea or point, and we'll get into what that looks like, what you should and shouldn't do. Some background information about your story, including the title and the author of the piece you're discussing. And then finally pulling it down into your claim or your thesis statement that you're working with. Your introduction should start general and then get more specific, and that's where that point on your diagram is coming into. To get very focused into your actual claim. So looking at your GFS, which is known as your general focus statement, or your hook, they're generally the same thing. Different teachers use different statements. I kind of use them both. It's a broad statement that a majority of people would find interesting or agree with. If you have a statement that a lot of people don't agree with, you're going to start losing your reader first sentence. So my suggestion, a lot of people in classes are going to start with a definition or a question. You don't want to be like everyone else. You want to be the standout. So when you start with the definition, you're going to look common. Don't be common. Be different. Be unique. In a world where a lot of people fit in, be the standout. If you start in defining basic terms, you're insulting your reader as if they don't know basic terms. So avoid doing that. You're telling them they don't know basic terminology. Don't start with a question. Have you ever wondered? And I'm thinking, no, I've never wondered. Now you've lost your reader. Okay, so you don't want to do that. It's also a common technique. Avoid that. You don't want to be like everyone else. If your reader doesn't want to answer your hypothetical question the way you want it to, you've lost that audience support. Do not start with a direct quote, because now you have to cite where you got it from. Anytime you cite something, or anytime you quote something, you have to cite it directly. Also, if you're citing a quote from a different source like Shaquille O'Neal and you're writing a piece about the Odyssey, it doesn't match. It's weird. It kind of doesn't fit. Or even some other major historical figure, doesn't work. Mother Teresa, Gandhi, and then you're talking about the Odyssey. We don't know what time period we're in. It just doesn't quite work. So it becomes disjointed. So my suggestion is not to go in those directions. A lot of people will also do that. What you want to do is think of some sort of a broad statement that a majority of readers would agree with, using professional language. Keep it along the same thread or theming of your topic. So a long time ago, we used to do the Cask of Amontillado, and there was a theme of revenge. again, without saying, have you ever thought of revenge? Well, yeah, okay. Starting with the question, you might suggest many people at one point or another have considered the idea of revenge. Most people would say, yeah, I've thought of that. Now, how far you would go? I mean, revenge could be like something tiny. I can't think of something off the top of my head. Something tiny versus some people in their minds decorate something much larger. But people don't, just because they think of it doesn't mean they act on it. And there's a difference there. And that could be part of your topic sentence or your general focus statement. Keep it along the same thread and theming of your topic. Look at the prompt and see what concepts arise from the prompt that can be built into a theme or a moral lesson that can be applied to a general statement. So while most people have ever entertained an idea of, oh, I would love to entertain revenge, that doesn't mean everyone would take part in a revenge plot. And then you talk about Cask of Amontillado, where you have a character actually follows through with revenge. Is that a sane action? Is that an insane action? And that's the question, or that's the topic that you're kind of exploring. While most people don't follow through, here's a character that did, and now you're exploring the idea. Okay, and that's what goes into your thesis. Again, doing it without asking questions. Okay, so sample: revenge is something that most people have thought of enacting, yet do not actually carry out their thoughts of retaliation. Professional language opens up that topic, and most people would say, yeah, I've ever thought of anything. Okay, even little kids. Okay, the thesis statement. Okay, so after you get into your hook, you want to consider your thesis statement. And typically what I suggest is people have their hook and then their thesis statement, and then they have to figure out how to put the two together, what needs to go between the two. Your thesis statement is your last sentence of your introductory paragraph. For now, you'll build a three-part thesis. As you go higher up in the English rotation here at school, you'll have some teachers that say, I don't want a three-part thesis. We want a fat thesis or fat sentence. That's later on. We'll tell you what that is. But the three-part thesis is a decent fallback, and that's what we're going to start with here. You keep it simple to start with. Must be tight and grammatically correct. Do not make it long-winded and wordy or overly complex in concept. Do not make it casual in language. Remember, keep it professional. Make sure the three parts are in the order you plan to present your idea. So if we're going back to the revenge concept, point A, point B, point C, well, point A is your first body paragraph, point B is your second body paragraph, point C, is your third body paragraph. Make sure you have it grammatically parallel. The language is clear and professional. So, Montresor is sane because he manipulates people. He is sane because he plans ahead. He is sane because he is calm throughout the murder. Montresor is sane because he manipulates people, he plans ahead, and he remains calm throughout the murder. So you take your three topic sentences, which is listed here. Okay. Number one is point one here. He manipulates people, he manipulates people. That's your first paragraph. Sentence two. He is sane because he plans ahead. Just put he plans ahead. He is sane because he manipulates people, he plans ahead, and he remains calm. Okay, that's what we mean by parallel structure. Okay, so typically what I'm suggesting that people do is you get your hook, and then your hook, which is up here. Yeah, I don't know if you can see my cursor. The hook and then the claim. Once you have those two, it helps you figure out, okay, here's my broad point, here's my narrow point. Now I know what I need to do to fill in and make it from this point A down to point C. How do I narrow that down? And that is where your plot points come into play. The background. You have the GFS and you have the thesis. Now you need to fill in the space between them. The idea is that you need to connect the two pieces together artistically, stylistically. So the creative writers tend to be really excited about this. The people who are less comfortable with that tend to get a little more frustrated. It doesn't mean you can't do it. There's a little bit of a formula to it, and that's what this handout is about. Okay, you want to have, okay, your GFS is revenge is something that most people have thought of enacting, yet do not actually carry out their thoughts of retaliation. We need to narrow that idea of revenge down on, let's see, and who acts on it and who doesn't. So at the same time, here's our sample. At the same time, people throughout literature have shared stories of revenge and anger that lead them to make unusual decisions. So what that sentence is doing, it's letting us know that in literature, we're talking a story about literature. We were talking about revenge in general. Now we're talking about revenge in stories of literature and revenge that makes unusual decisions, unusual decisions in literature. So now we've narrowed it down. We're not talking about news stories. We're not talking about movies. We're talking about literature. So now we have to narrow it down further to a specific story in literature, and that's where we're going to introduce the title and the author of the story. So for you guys, you're going to do the Odyssey by Homer. You have to introduce it correctly. So point 2 says, narrow down the background section by making the next sentence include the title and the author of the piece being discussed. Write it correctly. Novels and epic poems are italicized. Short poems and short stories are in quotation marks. So one such case of revenge and anger is in Edgar Allan Poe's character Montresor, the Cask of Amontillado. So this sentence not only gives you the title and the author, it also gives you a character. It's kind of tightly packed, but it's informative. So now we're in 3 sentences, right? We have to continue further with adding a small amount of story summary. This is all plot. It's not getting into argument yet. By incorporating the major characters with any major details, with 2 to 3 sentences of details paying careful attention to grammar. Okay, and then we can start to, after we get some of our characters in there, start to delicately incorporate some of that argument after we get those characters in there. So in this short story, Montresor's sanity is explored as he kidnaps his enemy Fortunato and tricks Fortunato into a well-conceived and murderous plan. Fortunato finds himself chained to a wall and ultimately buried alive by Montresor, causing readers to explore Montresor's sanity. Because the question is Montresor sane or insane? Okay, that was the prompt that they were given. All right, so we're given the information of Montresor kidnapping Fortunato, tricking Fortunato, and that Fortunato is ultimately chained to a wall and buried alive. So that's the bare minimum of the story. We don't get how he does it, that he's walking through catacombs and that Montresor is constantly feeding Fortunato wine throughout the way and all of this stuff. It's the bare minimum, but it's just enough where we're kind of like, oh, wow. As we read the essay, those little extra details will come alive and we'll go, oh, this is how he got him to murder this other character. He got him intoxicated. He fed him alcohol, which caused Montresor to become intoxicated, those kinds of things. So let me read you the full introduction as it's put together. As you put it all together, then you'll edit and polish for grammatical flow. But let's read it all together. Revenge is something that most people have thought of enacting, yet do not actually carry out their thoughts of retaliation. At the same time, people throughout literature have shared stories of revenge and anger that led them to make unusual decisions. One such case of revenge and anger is Edgar Allan Poe's character Montresor in The Cask of Amontillado. In this short story, Montresor's sanity is explored as he kidnaps his enemy, Fortunato, and tricks Fortunato into a well-conceived and murderous plan. Fortunato finds himself chained to a wall and ultimately buried alive by Montresor, causing readers to explore Montresor's sanity. Montresor is sane because he manipulates people, he plans ahead, and he remains calm throughout the murder. And then the rest of the entire essay will be convincing the essay reader that Montresor is actually sane because of his manipulative tactics, because of his planning skills, because of his calmness, that his acts of revenge are completely justified, that Fortunato was actually the predator in this case. Is a very interesting argument to make. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and ask the sub to pause and let you kind of work through this and see if you guys can kind of work on your intro yourselves for a few moments, okay? Hi again. Okay, so you should have been working through your intro paragraphs. The next part is conclusion paragraphs, which are just in the same manner format as your intro paragraphs. Follow a lot of the same pattern, okay? They are also professional, interesting, and dynamic. This should feel like a polished ending for it. They're interesting, dynamic, non-cheesy, not overly dramatic, okay? Feel polished and ended. Again, 6 to 8 sentences in length. I find a lot of students try to shorten this into 2 to 3 sentences, and you don't want to do this. When you end it that way, that is the last impression you're leaving your reader with. So if you end it rushed, that tends to finish your grade as a rushed grade. It tends to feel like you finished it at the last minute, you wrote it late at night, that kind of a thing. The last impression isn't good. So your first and last impression, you want to have them both be strong and powerful. Again, be professional, be sophisticated, be clear and direct in the direction of your essay or your conclusion. You present or repeat the final facts of your argument. You don't present anything new in your conclusion. There's no new arguments, there's no new plot points. It's like a final repetition recap. So think of your intro and your conclusion as hamburger buns. The top one is your fluffier bun, you're introducing more stuff. The conclusion is repeating everything, okay? Repeating everything. So they look like the same kind of thing almost. Again, don't be fluffy or wordy. Don't use conversational language. We're not your buddies or your friends. Don't take too long, but don't be too brief. Okay. So if you look at the diagram, the conclusion paragraph is almost like your intro but flipped. But what you don't want to do is take or make the mistake that a lot of students do and take each sentence and write it in reverse, because then it's going to feel like you're reintroducing your essay, and that's not what you're doing. You can take that thesis statement, you can take the same exact thesis statement and copy and paste it. Perfectly fine. If you try to change it too much, students tend to change their argument, and then it's not good either. What you then need to do is in a few sentences, like the same, let's see, 1, 2, 3. It says 1 to 2 sentences. I would say 2 to 4 sentences and a summary. You're recapping some of the main points and arguments of your essay. You don't want to re-summarize the story as if it's brand new. You can recap some of the summary plot points only if it recaptures your argument. So again, you're re-summarizing some of the main argumentative points from your topic sentence and 1 or 2 points that were proven in each paragraph, okay? So you're summarizing your argumentative points from your essay, nothing new introduced. And then is the tricky part, that broad ending. That broad ending, that last sentence, is what's called a food for thought. It's meant to make us think further. But again, you don't want to ask us a question. So let's kind of go over that point. Restate the thesis. You can copy and paste it. You'll learn how to reword it later. For right now, to avoid changing your argument, which a lot of students do, copy and paste it. Totally fine. So that's what we have. Same sentence here. Up here, he is saying because he manipulates people. Oops, God, my little cursor thing is off. Oh, I must have it weird. Okay, it's up here. He is saying he manipulates people, plans ahead, and remains calm. Again, when you're doing your summary, no conversational languages. Don't be overly long-winded or overly detailed. Retell the story the same way you did. Don't retell it the same way you did in the intro. You're not reestablishing or reintroducing characters. Like, we're not reintroducing Montresor for the first time. We're not reintroducing Fortunato for this first time. We've already met them. We've seen the dynamics between the two characters. In your case, you're doing the Odyssey and Odysseus and talking about maybe some of the characters and some of the monsters. We're not introducing Cyclops for the first time. We've already seen Odysseus and Cyclops and their battle between each other. So here's a sample for Cask of Amontillado. In the Cask of Amontillado, Edgar Allan Poe's timeless character Montresor helps readers explore the inner thoughts of a sane character who was mistreated by an enemy countless times, that the character enacts the ultimate revenge, murder. It is this concept that fills current media. So if you look at this next sentence, it is this concept that fills, why can't I highlight today? It's not letting me highlight. It is this concept that fills the current media with editorials about murder and revenge, where viewers and readers find themselves questioning the sanity of the predator. That last sentence is what's kind of pulling us into the real world, into ourselves. It's not a question, but it is bringing it into the present time to make us kind of wonder and think how timeless this story is, how it does apply to humanity. Yes, it's fiction. How much fiction is it when we're looking at it in news stories, when we see how people are acting this way today? Okay. That is leading us into that food for thought. Do not end with a question. Everybody does that. It's cheesy. Don't end with a quote, because then you got to cite a quote and it's common, and now you've got like a quote from somewhere else. Or even if you have a quote from the story, you have to start citing the page. It's a weird thing on the eyes. So try to think of, it's more professional and polished. If you think of a broad statement that the majority of readers would agree with, not 100%, you can't get 100% of everybody to agree with everything, but a majority of a population would agree with. Your best ending is going to cause the reader to reflect on his or her own opinion of the matter, using professional language, keeping along the theme of your topic. Okay, so you guys are learning about journeys. What do people learn on a journey? So even look at the first piece that we did, had the tennis shoe on it, a traveler's journey or something like that. What is the point of learning? What is the point of traveling and going on these trips and things like that? What concepts arise from the prompt that can be built into a theme or a moral lesson that can be applied into an overall statement that we can grow as humanity, grow as human beings and as humanity as a whole? Sample. This is what I came up with. Both fiction and media stories cause readers to explore their own feelings about the parameters of revenge and whether that revenge is enacted by a sane man. So for that topic, I looked at sanity and revenge, and I just kept those together, kept fiction through media and news stories, and looked at the idea of what is there any such thing as revenge and sanity, and can those two things go hand in hand? So here's your full conclusion sample. Montresor is sane because he manipulates people. He plans ahead and he remains calm throughout the murder. Nice recap of the story. Now I have to make it come outward in that upside down triangle situation. Okay. In the Cask of, or regular triangle, sorry. In the Cask of Amontillado, Edgar Allan Poe's timeless character, Montresor, helps readers explore the inner thoughts of a sane character who is mistreated by an enemy countless times. That the character enacts the ultimate revenge, murder. It is this concept that fills current media with editorials about murder and revenge, where readers and viewers and readers find themselves questioning the sanity of the predator. Both fiction and media stories cause readers to explore their own feelings about the parameters of revenge, and whether that revenge is enacted by a sane man. Okay. So hopefully that kind of helps you figure out how you're going to approach your own conclusions. The idea here is just take it one step at a time. These take a while to craft. You're not going to sit down and in 5 minutes put this together. You need to kind of do it over time and edit and edit and edit and muscle through this, work with tutors. I definitely would not suggest working with each other, because you're probably going to all end up, merging your stuff together, and I don't want you to do that. I want you to craft it on your own. But again, keep it professional. All right. Take care.